Good night, ladies and gentlemen, my loyal viewers on the Belmopan Town Hall. Welcome once again to another in the series. Tonight, I want to go over some of the observations that I have been noticing in the past 3 weeks of the new administration and give you some commentary and some concerns. Mainly because I see a continuation of the same issues that plagued the last administration. One would certainly want to believe that the lessons of past failures in relation to the political administrations that have come before would actually inform the actions of the succeeding administrations, but it doesn't seem to me that any of the lessons that have been passed on from these past administrations have actually been learned. In fact, I think that the administration, as we are seeing it right now, is tone deaf, highly sensitive, and not situationally aware, which is very dangerous. We in our country is in an unprecedented time of economic crisis brought about by the pandemic. We are also in the midst of the throes of multiple natural disasters that have caused endemic flooding across the nation, causing untold millions of dollars in damages. But most importantly, that has inhibited our ability to provide food for ourselves since grazing land has been underwater, denying livestock food, and arable lands are also underwater, preventing farmers from being able to cultivate their fields. Minimizing or reducing the available food source at the market, and also causing spike in prices due to scarcity of certain staple foods. One would have thought that given the fact that these issues, especially the pandemic and other things, were on the horizon, were actually impacting us before the election, that the new administration would have hit the ground running and would have come in with fresh ideas, fresh energy to address effectively and in a most coherent way the issues plaguing us. But honestly speaking, I have not seen that. In fact, I have seen a regression, and I have seen where the present administration seems to be lost at sea as it relates to its response and its management of the present crisis. I say that because it's been 3 weeks. We haven't even had the first House meeting as yet. This is way too long for there not to have been a convening of the National Assembly to have the new administration officially take office and lay out its plans of action in a manner for which the people could be most appreciative of the direction they are going to take the country. Instead, what we've been having is piecemeal doling out of the maladies and instances, widespread instances of corruption that plagued the past administration. Now, that's no news to us. most every Belizean knows that the last administration was corrupt. In fact, we'd be hard pressed to find any administration over the past 20 years that have not been plagued by instances of corruption. The question is not whether or not we can identify these instances, but whether or not the police are going to be made to do what they are supposed to do, which is to investigate and levy charges that lead to effective prosecutions of those who have done wrong to the nation of Belize. It serves no real purpose to have every other day someone coming on Facebook and other social media highlighting the ills that were done under the last administration. What is the purpose of that? Is it that as Belizeans you think that we would be satisfied with being incited and repulsed by this behavior? What is most appalling and repulsive is knowing what has been done wrong and doing nothing to attain justice. What we are interested in is justice, not an expose. That serves no one's purpose. And it certainly doesn't serve the purpose of the people of Belize. We've had former ministers of government who have admitted on their own accord to committing criminal acts. Instead of doling out who has gotten this Prado or who has gotten that tractor or whatever it may be, why not do something that will actually impact the Belizean people in a positive way? Because some of these ministers are going to be collecting pension from now till the day they die if they are not effectively prosecuted in the courts of law in Belize. Because that's the only way we can shake the anvil from around our necks, carrying the burden of having to pay these exorbitant pensions for past politicians who have raped and pillaged the public purse. In order to indemnify the people of Belize, we have to have effective prosecution. And I would suggest that it should start nowhere else than with the two most egregious malactors in the last administration, Elvin Penna and John Zaldivar. Why not prosecute these people? They have committed crimes that are actionable and should be, and for which due process should be followed. Now, in the case of Penna, there may be an issue where double jeopardy may arise, because one may say that by virtue of the sabotaged private prosecution of Penna, there may be a bar to bringing back an action against them. The only issue with that is that the police never properly conducted any investigation, even though the Commissioner of Police was issued with an order of mandamus from the Supreme Court of Belize to do so. So even the Commissioner of Police, who is receiving pension from the public purse, could be brought up on charges and stripped of his pension if this present administration is serious about stamping out corruption and setting a tone that would differentiate this administration from the last and from every other past administration in the country. As it relates to John Zaldivar, that's low-hanging fruit. Lev Derman was prosecuted in the courts of law in the United States. Jacob Kingston was one of the witnesses for the prosecution. Jacob Kingston made it clear that he gave money to John Saldivar. John Saldivar did not deny that he received money. In fact, he, in his text messages, confirmed what Jacob Kingston had asserted. And subsequently, he went on national TV in Belize, here at home, confessing to his crime. Now, the pensions for area representatives and politicians are not like the pensions for the ordinary public servants. The Arabs get more. In fact, as we have now seen, where the present administration, being again tone deaf and situationally unaware, has sought to increase the salaries of parliamentarians, to having ministers receive $112,200 and ministers of state some 85,000 plus per annum. That these salaries are way outside the scope of the highest salaries in the public service. Again, I qualify that by saying the public service, because the CEOs are not necessarily a part of the public service. They are part of the executive, governed by contract, and certainly not subject to the regulations of the rank and file public servant. So where we have these public servants who are being paid on a pay scale, topping out at somewhere around 50, maximum being $60,000 a year. You have area representatives, many of whom are barely literate, and many of whom have never even seen that kind of money before, getting a minimum of 85,000 plus for doing nothing. I can understand an adjustment of salaries for great performance, for improved service, for turning the economy around and making it robust and vibrant. But when nothing has been done to enhance the economy and bring prosperity to the people of Belize, how can you justify giving yourself more money in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of endemic flooding, widespread scarcity, high prices, unemployment? How can you justify that? How can you justify that when you are in the middle of negotiations with the Public Service Union, where the bottom line of these negotiations is who is going to lose it? Who and how many are going to lose their jobs? How can you justify taking more money from the public purse to put into the pockets of representatives when Belizean people are literally starving? It does not display any level of situational awareness at all. It is the most tone deaf move that could be made by any administration, and it suggests that the corruption we have seen between 2008 and 2020 continues unabated. In fact, it appears that we are going to have higher levels of corruption and not less. This is what the move suggests to me. You know, that's my opinion. I may be wrong, and I hope to be wrong, but this doesn't look good. It does not look good at all. And again, these little snippets showing that persons have been getting high-end vehicles at very, very low prices. Yes, we understand that this is being done. But are you doing that as a means to distract us from what you are doing? We do not want to continue to play three-card Monty with you, or find the bead under the coconut shell. We don't want to be playing that game, find the queen. We don't want to be playing that game anymore. Those kinds of games are for carnival side shows and agriculture show now and again, but it's not for us in 2020 with all the problems we're facing. We want governance, transparent, competent governance. And if we don't get transparent, competent governance, then this experiment with a new administration will be short-lived. There will be no long honeymoon period here. The people cannot afford it. We're in the month of December. And in this month of December, we have Christmas season coming up. At a time when the coronavirus is rampant. My understanding is that we are up to 7,000 cases in the country at this time. This is alarming. We have over 130 deaths already. We had a police officer a few days ago who tested positive and who was positive and wound up dying because he couldn't get attention in time, which goes back to the beginning of this virus, this pandemic here in Belize, where my friend Hubert Pipersberg saw a similar fate. So we are not improving. At best, we're staying stagnant, and at worst, we're regressing. But we're not improving. And certainly, this administration had all the time in the world to observe what the past administration had been doing, could have taken the positives and done away with the negatives. But here we are in a situation where instead of improving in its response to addressing this pandemic, the present administration seems to be lost at sea. I had the occasion to listen and hear Dr. Fernando Cuellar recently, and I believe that his suggestions are sound. There is certainly a need to recruit a cadre of young people from the sixth forms, from those leaving high school, to go out and administer the tests following adequate training for them to do so safely. We have this civic center right there in Belize City that can be used as a place for conducting tests. it can be set up in a way where this distancing can be done. And there are other places where it can be done. The Marion Jones Stadium, people can drive in, not even stay with right inside their vehicles, and be swabbed and their specimen collected to determine whether or not they have the virus or not. And this can be done that way. It is not rocket science, but there is certainly a need to step up the number of tests. One of the suggestions that Dr. Koway had was not to shut down, but to do a more targeted, take a more targeted approach to how you will contain the virus in places where it is found to be in high numbers. Orange Walk, for instance. The movement of people in and out of Orange Walk has gone unabated. And if we're saying that there's a high concentration of virus in Orange Walk, then there has to be some curtailing of access in and out of Orange Walk. It cannot be that we have people going in and out so freely from that locale until the virus is contained to such an extent that it is rendered insignificant in terms of its numbers. We're up to 7,000 people. In fact, we're up to 7,000. So there is need to take a more comprehensive and targeted approach to addressing the pandemic. I want to tell you that the redistricting case continues as well. We would have hoped that, recognizing that there is this huge malapportionment across the nation where constituencies in the city are way too small and those in the districts way too large, that the new administration would come to the table and negate the need for the court to rule on the matter. But that has not happened. So the Belize Peace Movement marches on with its matter in court, and the matter should be reconvened on the 4th of March of 2021. Because again, these issues are not partisan issues. They are national issues. We must do what we can to improve our democracy, because the democracy is going to be here long after we are all gone. And what we do now will determine the quality of life those who come after us will have. And that is the best thing we can do now. Do everything in our power to ensure that those that come after us have a better chance at making a life that they can be proud of than we have right now. Because I'm telling you, for many Belizeans, it's difficult, almost impossible. Mainly because the way our system has been manipulated, it is geared towards creating a bottleneck where people, in order to access the opportunities for their own survival, have to go through a politician. We have placed the politician in a position where he is almost a god, having the power of life and death in his hands. That is not what democracy is about. So we must continue to be vigilant. And we cannot let up. Not for a minute, not for a second. We have to hold them honest. Yes, we hope that they do better. We hope that they do better. But we have to do more than just hope. We got to work to ensure that they do better. And I invite every Belizean, all of you listening to me, to join me. Amabel Tablada says that the past administration didn't ramp up testing till now. Quarantine is being addressed. The past administration didn't have a plan. No, it's not only about Orange Walk, the entire country. This was before the administration comes in. Amabel, I certainly would like to think and like to believe what you're saying. I would want to see some evidence of it. It may be so. I will tell you this. I haven't seen it. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And if it is out there and you can highlight and tell me where these things are taking place, I would be more than happy. I do know, however, that there were quarantine centers set up before. Victor Galvez Stadium, different places around the country were used as quarantine centers by the past administration. I know that the tests and the testing was certainly inadequate then. It's only been 3 weeks of the PUP administration. But if you are not doing more tests, at least come to the nation and tell us what you're doing. Because, as I've said, there has been no House meeting since this new administration has taken office. No House meeting at all. So I do not know where to draw the information as to what is being done countrywide in relation to this pandemic. And given that we're in a pandemic, there should have been a House meeting. This is a national crisis that we're in the midst of. This is a time for leadership. Now I understand that the Prime Minister himself had contracted the virus, and that may have played a role in the House meeting not being held. Understood. But is he still in that situation? Is he still incapacitated by the virus that he cannot have a House meeting now? We want to know. We need to know. We need to hear from our representatives. Your mic is not on, P.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about the mic situation there. Hi, Ada. I'm going to read comments since Miss Glenise is not here tonight, and I just decided to interrupt a bit, Ada, so we can get some of the comments shared.
Your audio is not coming across clearly.
My audio is not clear. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you continue, and then I'll come back in and I'll read some of the comments. But I'll work on the audio situation. Okay.
Wonderful. And so let me say good night again to my viewers. I'm running blind because I cannot see exactly what your input is as yet, but the moderator will be coming on momentarily to inform me, of your input, because again, this is an interactive show. I want you to participate and give me your observations as well, because that is the only way we are going to be able to assist ourselves in understanding what's taking place and lay out some way to understand and appreciate how we can get through what we're going through right now. Because our government also needs our help, and we will help in whichever way we can. One of our biggest problems is that we have done very little to mitigate against the impact of the disasters that we know we would face. We know that every year from June to November, there is a hurricane season, and there's some likelihood that even if we're not hit directly by a hurricane, that there would be weather systems that would cause flooding problems in our country. But despite that, we have done nothing to improve our road communications to the extent that we could access and take to safety livestock in rural villages in a timely manner. What happened in Maypen and Crooked Tree is inexcusable. It is not to be foisted on the lap of this administration. They just got in 3 weeks ago. But certainly between 2008 and 2020, considering that there was over $700 million in Petro-Caribe funds that could have been invested in proper infrastructure to allow for greater access in terms of our transportation network, that would have mitigated against the losses in livestock that took place as a result of these flood incidences. Where did that $700 million go? Who is going to be held responsible for the loss of all that money? Hugo Chavez is no longer here with us. The likelihood that any other country is going to ever give us a deal like Venezuela gave us is highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. So we have totally squandered a golden opportunity to have done immense work for our people. And I do not see any level of seriousness from the present administration holding those responsible for that pillaging accountable. One of the things that raised my concern is this whole thing about the $1,000 for phone allowance. Which company is going to be getting that phone allowance money? BTL or Smart? Where is it going to go? It's quite a bit of money for phone calls in a month. Wonderful. We go to the comments now.
Okay, so how am I with sound?
Perfect.
Awesome. So we have Nancy De Paz. She says good night, Mr. Saldiva, Mr. Arthur
Good night,
Saldiva
Nancy.
of Belmopan. We also have RJ Anderson, who says be safe. Shelbourne was responding to what you were commenting on earlier, and he says right. Glennis says good night. Of course, she's watching with us. Wasn't able to make it tonight. However, we'll be here next time. Annabelle Tabladas says, so how would re-registration help our country?
Okay. Re-registration? No, redistricting.
She says re-registration. I guess she may have meant redistricting.
Yeah. Redistricting. It's about fairness and representation. It basically will help our country by ensuring that we don't have voter discrimination, that there is equal protection of law. Right now, as it stands, well, the food pantry or grocery bag or whatever they want to call it now has been suspended at a time when people most need it. But we know that over the past years when it was in existence, It was highly concentrated in the city, and most rural communities were not getting anything. What redistricting does to ensure that the resources of the country is more equitably distributed, to ensure that people in our country, no matter where they live, are able to benefit from the resources of the country, that which is controlled by the state. As it stands right now, it is highly city-centric. And places like Belmopan, which has a huge voting population, and places like Stanley West and Kaya South are not adequately represented or serviced by these programs, these public programs. Go ahead, Pete.
Awesome. So Glenise made a comment that was so sad, especially because he was a police officer. He was protecting us. And of course, she says I was unable to be on the show, but we'll be back soon with God's blessings.
Looking forward, missing you.
Yes, indeed. Wayne A. Moody says, hey, just landed in Oakland, heading home to LA. Let's connect sometime soon. On the plane heading to LA, continue to pray for you. Teresita Caratella says, bless, good night, everyone. And Mr. Ata.
Good.
Annabelle Tablada says, why press all concerns now on the government when you all didn't press on the past administration? Come on.
Well, listen, again, this show has been on the air now from, well, we've been doing this for more than 2 years. And I'll be consistent. It's not a matter of piling on to the new administration, but we must keep them honest. This is what democracy is about. If we do not work the democracy will never improve. It is not about personality issues. It's about ensuring that the nation continues to develop in a way that will positively impact the vast majority of its citizens. So if we become a lapse, we have to understand it's human nature. We do not stay behind and keep the pressure on, then we're going to have complacency set in. And we cannot afford that, because complacency leads to corruption in the Belizean context. So we need to be able to look and observe and be objective about things and point them out without fear or favor, because that's what our Constitution allows for us to do. The Constitution of Belize gives us it guarantees and recognizes that we have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and we have these rights that are inalienable. And part of those rights is to ensure that we do whatever we need to do to ensure that the rule of law prevails, and that those who are given the mantle of authority to make laws do so in a way that is beneficial to us as Belizeans. So I will not apologize for what I'm doing. I will do what I do because I was trained, and I give my training to the benefit of my people. And I will do so without fear or favor.
So Hubert Earl Escarpeta says, where are the plans moving forward? Yes, keep them honest, and let's hope they'll be transparent, Mr. Saldiva.
Exactly. Thank you very much for joining us, Hubert. And the thing about it is this, again, as I said, we can see where certain decisions that have been made are indicative of past corruption. This raise in salary, what has been done in the past 3 weeks to justify this? Is this some way to recover campaign funds, money spent during a campaign? Because that's not what the people elected you for. The people didn't elect an administration to go back and recuperate monies that they spent in a campaign. $112,200. for 16 persons, $85,000 plus for 10 persons every year. So basically, you're telling me that by the end of this administration's term, everybody will be a millionaire. Every one of those 26 will be a millionaire. And understand, the salaries are one thing. There are perks and privileges that goes above and beyond what they will be making in terms of salary. That is without performing and doing anything to justify that. That in itself is corruption, man. Because you're taking out of the public purse at a time when people are going to be made to sacrifice as a result of the pandemic and the floodings and everything else that's taking place. There's a great lamentation about contracts that have been given to cronies of the past administration. People who should have had the dignity and integrity to resign and leave. But despite the fact that we are saddled with that, with those huge contracts for these CEOs and high-ranking members of the past administration, this new administration is actually upping the ante. So you can't lament about that when you're giving yourself this huge raise without even curing that problem. Now, I'll tell you something. The easiest way to break a contract when you're in government is to rely on the issue of national security. The nation cannot afford to pay. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We cannot afford to pay this kind of salary. So what we will tell those persons, Ms. Bevans at BTB and whoever else is there with these huge contracts, is a simple thing. Everybody in this administration, everybody who is a part of the public service and the appointees who are being brought on will be brought on with the understanding that as a result of the pandemic, we are going to cap salaries at $50,000 per annum. And then you go to the House and you make that a law. And when you mandate that by law, then the contract that they have, which extends beyond what you are saying the country can afford by virtue of this national crisis, which makes it a national security issue, will take you out of the contract that you have with them. So you reduce their salaries and then you take away their responsibilities and you let them go and do some menial tasks and frustrate them and let them have to leave. But first address the money, because that's what this is all about, the money. But you cannot justify not paying them when you're paying yourself more. So it makes no sense. You want to get rid of those contracts? Then rethink this salary increase. Rethink the salary increase. You got to wait until the country can afford to pay you that kind of money before you can actually write yourself that check. Do something first. There is a plan Belize that I have read. And that plan Belize was supposed to have been the blueprint to bring this economy from where it is as a struggling one to one that is working and becoming prosperous. But you have not even given your plan Belize a chance to work before you go in and trying to reap the harvest. Nobody reaps the harvest after you just put down the seed. The seed has not even been given a chance to germinate, but you already want to collect fruit. No, man, that's not the way this thing works. Give the plan a chance. And let's see if the plan will yield fruit. And if the plan yields fruit, then nobody can blame you for giving yourself a pay raise. Because when you give yourself a pay raise, it means then that others in the public service and across the nation in the private sector are also getting pay raises. Who can fault you then? But you are going to get a pay raise now when people are actually looking to lose their jobs. That's a bad look. That's a very bad look. So before you assumed office, while you were running and campaigning and going to the houses of the people, you're telling us that you shared our pain. Well, the people are still in pain until you have actually applied the medicine and bring us out of this state of hurt. How can it be justified that you will give yourself all this money? It's a very bad look. Stone deaf. So I'm saying it's not too far along as yet. There is still room for adjustment. There's still time for you to come and say to the nation, mea culpa, the timing was wrong. We are going to try to earn that, so that when we do raise our salaries, the messenger at the post office and the orderly at the hospital will also be seeing a pay raise. And the police officer on the beat and the nurse who is pulling 3 shifts at the Carl Hushner will also be able to put more bread on the table and afford themselves at least a steak for the family a week. But until then, man, you can't be doing what you're seeking to do. $112,200 a year. We have had on average less than 10 house meetings every year. Now, the house meetings are where the representatives actually work, because not every representative is a minister. 10 house meetings a year, and representatives are going to be getting $85,000 to travel from where they are, whether they're coming from Punta Gorda or Corozal or Belize City or Belmopan, wherever they're coming from, to sit in the house, to do the people's business, which they do very infrequently. They're going to get $85,000 a year. When that happens, you're sending the signal to every public officer that it is okay for them to want more for doing less. And this is what is causing the breakdown in the public service, where public officers are expecting to get paid under the table for jobs, for things that they're already getting paid for from the public purse. It's because of what you are doing in your positions as area reps and ministers, distancing yourself from the people and giving yourself exorbitant salaries that cannot be justified by the state of the economy. That has to stop. That has to stop. What is going to be done with BTL? The Prime Minister of Belize has to tell us. Will BTL be sold to Smart, just as Scotiabank was sold to Ashcroft? Will Ashcroft own the banking sector and the telecommunications sector as a monopoly? Because we know he owns 95% of Smart. And by virtue of the WWE style litigation, he also owns BTL. Not in the not in the legal sense yet, but certainly in equity, because the amount of money owed to Ashcroft by virtue of those ill-conceived lawsuits is well over the value of what BTL is. So will this charade be brought to its natural end and BTL be given back to Ashcroft under some guise? Because that's what's coming next. Let's not fool ourselves. We saw how quickly the deal was consummated. That basically saw Nova Scotia being sold to Belize Bank. So now, to allow you to let me help you to understand what this means for you, the Belizean people and the Belizean person. If you had a mortgage at Belize Bank, and as a result of this pandemic, your mortgage, which you had before the pandemic started, was at a certain rate that you could have afforded because of your salary that you were earning prior to the pandemic, and you were making your payments. But since the pandemic hit, as with many people, you saw your income go down and you have to renegotiate with the bank. Well, if Belize Bank, where you have your mortgage, refuse to accept your proposal for reducing the premium of your mortgage, you had other banks that you could turn to. And one of those banks was Scotiabank, which was another of the major banks. The two biggest banks were Belize Bank and Scotia. And then you have Atlantic Bank coming after, and bring up the rear was Heritage Bank. But now, Belize Bank owns Scotiabank, so Scotiabank is out. You cannot go to Scotia and try to move your mortgage from Belize Bank to Scotia at some favorable rate. That is no longer open to you. Now, Atlantic Bank and Heritage Bank, Ashcroft might not have overt interest in those banks, but Ashcroft affiliated persons have huge interest in those banks. So he still has his tentacles there in some way, shape, or form. So what we have is a banking, what we thought we had was a banking oligopoly. We may very well have now a banking monopoly controlled by Ashcroft. In fact, he controls more than 68% of Belize's financial sector now, which is too much for one man to have in a small economy, and an economy in crisis at that. The combined assets of that Scotiabank and Atlantic, Scotiabank and Belize Bank is presently dealing with is huge. It's a huge asset portfolio. Just imagine the foreclosure rate that we will have in the coming months and years under this new banking regime. It's a dangerous thing. You will not see it immediately, but it's going to be very impactful in the short to medium term. It'll be very impactful in a very negative way. Because let nobody fool you. Belize is one of the most beautiful countries is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. We have 3 of the 4 coral atolls in the Western Hemisphere. We have the largest living reef in the world. We have over 200 coral islands. We have beauty beyond compare. And the bank have access to all of that. Because in some way, shape, or form, these assets are brought into the bank. And we are losing Belize. We're losing a piece of Belize every day. And this is what we've been set up for. So now we have banking and we have telecommunication. And I will tell you this. If you want to appreciate the reality that existed in terms of the so-called fight between the last administration and Ashcroft, look no further than the interconnection between SMART and BTL. There was no fight. BTL and its customer base is the largest in the country, has the largest reach, the largest number of customers, subscribers. SMART cannot be a viable company without having access to BTL's subscriber base. So there had to be cross-platform communication between SMART and BTL customers. You had to be able to call a BTL number from your smartphone for SMART to be a viable company. Well, the easiest way for BTL to recover all that money it lost in that litigation process was to raise its fee for interconnection, which it could have done. Because BTL is supposed to have been our company, belonging to the people of Belize. But did they raise the interconnection fee? They did not. And if you didn't raise the interconnection fee, then SMART will always be in a position to compete. BTL may not have been able to deny SMART interconnection, but it could have raised the fee. They never did that. So we have to ask the question, what will Johnny do? What will Johnny do with BTL? What will he do? Will we make money off BTL if we sell it? I don't think so. Because we owe more than what BTL is worth to Ashcroft. So will we see a SMART sign and a SMART flag being raised on St. Thomas Street very soon? That may very well be in the cards. Let's see. Let's see.
So, Ata, we have a few more comments. So, Hubert Earl Escarpeta says, Ata, you really bring a needed balance to Belizean politics to both parties. Joseph Nalberto says, Gore Ata. Lisa Saldiva Urban says good night to the team. And Wiseman Pat also wishes everyone good night.
Good night. Well, listen, it was fun. We had the hour went by quite quickly. I'll be back again next week. Same place, same time. We want to be able to bring a discourse that is objective. I will call a spade a spade. If the administration does something that I believe is worthy of praise, I will not hesitate to give them their accolades. But where I see any decision being made that, in my estimation, is along the path of what I've seen before, I will call it out. I will call it out. And let nobody say, where was I when the last administration was doing all its shenanigans? I was right here. In fact, there were times when I was sitting in a piss house, having to go to court to defend myself for exercising my constitutional rights. And these things I will do all over again if I have to. Because Belize needs to have its citizens appreciate what the Constitution gives us and are willing to ensure that we get it. If we accept injustice, we will continue to go down this road of self-destruction. We cannot carry a partisan mantle 24/7 and expect that we will have an improved democracy. Patriotism is not about partisanship. Patriotism is about putting the country first. The parties are supposed to be vehicles through which persons who want to engage in the political process are allowed to do so. But the vehicle is only a conduit that serves the greater purpose of nation building. The nation is first, not the vehicle, not the party. So let's not get it twisted. And please, let's not be short-sighted. I have been here, I will continue to be here, and I will be nothing less than who I am. Good night.